My background is in leading digital technology and data transformation programs in big organisations. I did that for about the last 5 or 6 years in central government, first at the Ministry of Justice and then at the Department for Work and Pensions, and now I'm doing the same thing in a financial services organisation with ThoughtWorks, where I've been for about 4 months. The main thing that I want to get across to you today, and we've got about half an hour together, I'm going to talk for about 10 to 15 minutes of that, and then I'd really like to get into a conversation because that makes it more interesting for me, is the people aspect of doing a business transformation. In my experience, technology isn't the main problem in doing technology-led transformation whatsoever. It's the fact that your people aren't set up to succeed. And I've learned time and time again from doing sort of cutting-edge technology programs that the cutting-edge technology was absolutely fine. The fact that the people weren't set up to cope with that technology and to adapt to it was the main problem. So when I talk about business transformation, digital transformation, data transformation, and the other things I talk about, it's invariably about the people elements of it that I focus on. Does that make sense? So I'm going to talk about skills, teams, outcomes, and leadership. I'm going to talk about 4 things, and then we can get into a bit of a discussion about that. One of the main things that I have learned to focus on at the beginning of any business transformation is to make sure that the skills you've got in your organisation are the right things to be able to cope with new technology, and not necessarily getting the right niche technology capabilities, but making sure that people are able to cope with change regardless of what that change is. So it's focusing on adaptability as opposed to just on niche technology skills. The first thing I would say is this has almost invariably been my journey of transformation, that you're about 3/4 reliant on external talent at the point you set off. And I've heard people be very insecure about this kind of a model because it's expensive, people can walk out, are you getting a sustainable skill set for the future? And what I've learned is as long as you do an active transition for the first 2 to 3 years of any transformation, then that can work. So I'd say don't be discouraged or insecure about that. One thing I would say though is you have to make active transitions in your internal skill sets to be able to do transformation of any kind. So I've just put up some examples. I didn't want to give any abstract examples, so these are literal examples of a human being who starts with this job title on the left and has transitioned to this job title on the right. I could have listed more of these. The point I'm trying to illustrate is it is okay, valid, cost-effective, a good idea to transition people from one skill set to another, but you can't allow them to drift from one to another. In the case of, for example, an analyst versus a data scientist, which is a typical transition I would see in a sort of digital evolution, people who are used to very static technologies, old school technologies, and then are rebadged as data scientists are set up to fail. So you as leaders need to make sure that they're not just given a whizzy job title and maybe a bit more cash. You have to really lead them on that learning journey, and it will take at least 3 to 6 months for people to retrain and transition from left to right. It's a really great way of demotivating people to give them sexy job titles and then not back them up with the learning and the training that they need. The roles on the right are also typically used in agile environments, and almost invariably digital and technology-led transformation involves some element of adopting agile. As you transition people from an older school skill set, even old school technology skill set, to a new one, you must make sure they're founded in the principles of what agile is. And this is a separate slide deck which I will not be presenting, but don't do plastic agile. So if you're transitioning people from a relatively static way of learning to an iterative way of doing things, you must lead them through that along with their professional transition. Once you've got the right skills and you're on the journey to do that, the next thing to do is to set your teams up right. I would always encourage you to work in the intersections between digital, data and technology skills. It's very typical. You either get a sexy external CDO who goes whizzy on the tech and you ignore the data, or you get somebody who's all about design but they ignore the technology. What you need to do is to lead in the center of these 3 circles. So you need to focus on building intersectional skills and making sure you're doing the transition of all of these skill sets at one time. So from digital, you'll tend to get agile, design-led, research-led ways of working, and you absolutely need that. At the same time, you need to adopt the best of commodity tech. So things like cloud technology, microservice architecture, lots of things which I could talk about but won't. And also DevOps culture, which is well, I could describe it in a number of ways. The benefit of a DevOps culture is iterative continuous delivery. So it's agile for technology is how I think of it. And you must absolutely include the data skill set in there as well. So that could be transferring your existing analysts to work with modern technology, and they transfer into a data science skill set, but also leveraging the best of what you've already got and making sure that people have access to your data. And then it's really about pairing all of the best of your technologists with the other skill sets in your organization. And I really can't overstate how important it is to co-locate these types of skills. Far too often I've seen digital and technology transformation fail because even when you get the whizzy techies together, they're off in a corner and people either don't trust them or they don't listen to them or they don't get the best of customer insight. So I'd say that operational expertise is absolutely paramount to doing any transformation. A typical failing I've seen is to have operational expertise ignored in favor of focusing on technology-led transformation. Absolute killer, because your operational people, if you're customer facing, have got the best feel of what your customers or your users want from you. If you pair them with the rest of these skills, then you're absolutely onto a winner. This is Hackney Service Centre, so it's a local authority service centre. The public come in and mill around here. So this is births, marriages, deaths, tax, potholes, you name it. And up there is their digital team, just a floor above. Now that means a couple of things. It means it's extremely hard to ignore failure because it's happening literally underneath your feet. And they have to walk through that to get to work. So the quality of the conversation that you pick up when you're observing people's lives playing out in front of you, well, I was going to say you can't buy it. You can buy it because I've got this estate. You can buy it, but only if you do that. So I would say there's no real replacement, even if you're extremely research-led, which a lot of great technology, a lot of great companies in the middle of technology transformation are. There's no real replacement for as close as you can get to co-location with the people who are using your services. The next thing to do, say you've got the right skills and your teams are set up, is to make sure you're focusing on the right things and using outcome-driven ways of transforming your organization. This is maybe the best example I can think of how to do this. So Jacinda Ardern recently flipped New Zealand's primary motive of growth from GDP towards well-being. She wants to grow well-being as an explicit act for the country. They're still a little bit growth-led, but really everything that they do, and when you go to the equivalent of Treasury over there, you have to make sure that anything you're doing as a public servant meets one of 5 well-being targets, and things like reducing child poverty and increasing equality and all that kind of thing. So my point being, what you measure really matters. In a more mundane way, but I really like this, this is a way of getting crowdsourced data from a local authority to the people who can fix the problem. So a great outcome doesn't have to be the reduction of child poverty on a national scale. It can be as easy as filling in somebody's pothole. It's any way that you can focus on a real human outcome and quickly fix the problem. So I've tried to map this in a sort of diagrammatic way. So I would say always start with the user of whichever service. Make sure you're building for the right people. Focus on the outcome that you want for their life. Do you want them to have really great filled-in potholes very quickly? Do you want to make them richer? Do you want them to get to your services quicker? Whatever it is, but focus on them. Make sure you're measuring the right things around that outcome. So try to stay away from vanity metrics. Try to stay away from things which are easy to improve but don't have any measurable benefit from somebody. Once you're measuring the right things, you can start to derive insights from that. Once you can derive insights from that, you can start to improve those metrics in a way that's meaningful for the people you're serving. And at that point, again, another branch slide deck, which I won't be giving, is you can start to do predictive analytics and use automated ways of trying to improve those outcomes. And then the last thing I'm going to say is about leading with integrity. I talk about leadership a lot. I'm sort of slightly obsessed with it. But to try and distill my views on this, this is kind of the most important leadership qualities that you should be adopting if you want to set your organization to succeed in any kind of transformation environment. So the main thing to start with is humility. So the general idea that we haven't got all the answers and we need to go and seek those answers and learn from them is absolutely paramount in order to make sure your organization is absorbent of the things that it can learn. That leads to a culture of learning. So your people will go out and say, oh, we haven't got all the answers. We need to go and do research with customers. We need to go and learn from other organizations in our sector. We need to go and get some skills in that can help us to do this, maybe get some experts in. And typically organizations that do this well set aside quite a lot of time for learning. Up to 20% of a working week of a transformation team set aside just for organic learning. What that leads to is a sense of experimentation, and as you as leaders can endorse that and make that an explicit part of your way of working. So using hypotheses to drive what you do, either literally within product and service delivery or in terms of your skill set and how you evolve that, making sure you're delivering small things frequently and testing how successful they are will be a central part of doing any of these transformations. It has to be coupled with freedom to fail. So executives, senior leaders have to make sure that you're giving your permission for people not to do a perfect job. In fact, if you try and get them to do a perfect job, you'll fail at all of this anyway. So giving people freedom to fail and you taking the fall for that, not the glory when it succeeds, is an absolute vital part of leadership of any of these transformation programs. Along these qualities, values, norms, whatever you want to call them, it's absolutely vital that you try and conquer the biases that exist within your own teams. One great way of doing really terrible technology-led transformation is to assume that you know what your customers want from you, what your users want from you. Going out there and being data-driven in what people want and conquering your own biases about the right thing to do next is going to be so vital in getting all of this done. It always goes hand in hand with diversity and inclusion. So I really love this quote from Sheryl Sandberg: the best way to hire more women is to hire more women. As a woman, that's quite important to me. But see also race, see also disability, see also cognitive difference. I see far too many excuses made about X. You can't hire X into this role, there just isn't the market for it. Those excuses just won't fly. Everybody knows now, and it's proven, that diverse teams are more high performing. So that is done, that's a fact. So your job, if you're going to set up your organisation to succeed, is to build that diverse and inclusive team. And the best advice I could give you is just to try harder. So, example, the last job I was in at the Department of Work and Pensions, data science. Women data scientists and black data scientists. The market was too small, we couldn't get them. Well, we could get them, but it involved taking gender bias out of our job ads, involved going out to marketplaces for minority groups, involved touting ourselves around at events, involved 2 to 3 times more effort than I ever could have imagined to get a racially and gender balanced data science team. It just takes way more effort than I would have thought, and that's my main advice: try harder than you think you have to. If you do that, you get diverse and inclusive teams, they're high performing, you do a better job. And then finally, I would say servant leadership. I tried to do this in a sexy way, but basically these are the words that I want to say. So servant leaders, in my experience, push power away from themselves. It's really scary to do that, but you have to do that. So what you want to do is try to create teams with as much autonomy as you physically can. That means taking fewer decisions yourself. It means, as I say, taking the fall but not the glory. If it fails, it's your problem. If the team succeeds, it's theirs. And you get paid more money to do that, so I think it's fair enough, really. So it's taking all the hit, but giving the credit to the people who are doing the job. Uninviting yourselves from things you can't add value to. One of the best ways that you can free yourselves up to steer this kind of stuff really well is to not delve into the minutiae of what teams are doing at all. So try and keep yourself away from it, try and balance your own insecurity out. And if you genuinely can't add value to any meeting, any forum, any group, any team, try and zoom yourself out of it and leave yourselves to think about the bigger stuff. And focus mainly on being an unblocker. So focus on serving the teams. Focus on making sure that there's no friction in the way that they work. Focus on making sure that if you hear things about them that mean that they can't perform, you go and tackle that with those stakeholders directly. They're the main ways you can add value. Right, summary. So get the skills you need, set your teams up right, focus on outcomes, and lead with integrity. Thank you very much for your time.